Hello and a very warm welcome to the Analyst dated 26 June 2026, brought to you by Vajiram and Ravi, wherein we'll be looking into the 6th set of current affairs issues along with the mains value addition article. The handout of this very discussion has been pinned in the comment section below for a future reference. Now, beginning with the analysis section, in the first topic, we'll try and understand that why India is focusing upon shipbuilding industry, what are the challenges pertaining to this particular sector, and what needs to be done in order to emerge as a major player when it comes to shipbuilding industry. Moving on to the second topic, herein we'll try and understand that why India is constantly reporting a lot of road fatality related cases, what are the causes in this respect, what all steps the government has taken in this particular respect, and what more needs to be done in order to enhance the road safety in India. Then we'll be covering the mains value addition articles which would be relevant for your upcoming mains examination. And lastly, we will be looking into 4 prelim pointers wherein the value addition has been done keeping in mind the prelims examination. So stay tuned. Now, beginning with the first topic, which is dealing with the shipbuilding industry in India, this particular topic, you can relate with GS paper 3, infrastructure, and therein we have ports topic. Now, why we are discussing about shipbuilding industry today? The reason being, a write-up has appeared in The Hindu, wherein the writer is pointing out that how if India collaborate with South Korea with respect to shipbuilding, it can give a boost to the shipbuilding industry in India. And recently, when it comes to the South Korean president, this year only, he was on a visit to India. And during this visit itself, the South Korea and India has signed various MOUs, Memorandum of Understanding. And these MOUs are going to give a boost to the shipbuilding industry in India. Why the writer is saying this? Because 3 of the big major players when it comes to South Korea, they have announced that they are going to make investment in India when it comes to the shipbuilding sector. Now, the article is basically pointing out that we can very well learn a lot of things from South Korea, which started its journey in this particular domain in 1970s. But today, it has emerged as a global player when it comes to the shipbuilding sector. So what all things we can learn from South Korea, that we'll be looking into. But for a mains point of view, we need to be aware of the different facets when it comes to the shipbuilding sector in India. So let's try and understand the first aspect, that is why India is focusing upon putting in place an effective shipbuilding industry in India. And why India has placed a target that by 2030, we will be emerging as the top 10 global shipbuilding nation. Why we need to focus upon shipbuilding? First and foremost, when it comes to the shipbuilding sector in India, the performance is very poor. And this is something that you can very well understand by looking at the report, that is Review of Maritime Transport Report of 2023, which is released by UN Conference on Trade and Development. It clearly points out that when it comes to India's contribution to the global shipbuilding industry, it is less than 1%. On the other hand, if you look at the figures of China, it is contributing around 47%. So China is a major player when it comes to the shipbuilding sector. This is one reason. We want to improve our contribution when it comes to the global shipbuilding industry. And obviously, we want to make money out of that. Then another reason being, since we are not doing the shipbuilding thing within the domestic economy, then how are we doing the cargo transportation in India? So for that, we are dependent upon the foreign shipping vessels. Now, basic economics, we all know that if we are taking the foreign shipping companies' services, you have to make payments in dollar. And that is going to have a negative impact on the forex reserves which the India is having. So just flip the side. If we start doing the shipbuilding within the domestic economy, what would happen? We would not be dependent upon the foreign shipping vessel services, and we can save a lot of forex reserves. This would give a boost to the forex reserves which the India is having. Then another reason is strategic reason. It is also important from the national security point of view. See, nowadays, countries like China, countries like Russia, they are coming up with new advanced technology. Okay. So if we want to secure our national interest, especially when it comes to the international waters, we need to make advancement when it comes to the shipbuilding sector. It is only when we strengthen the shipbuilding capabilities at the domestic level, we will be in a very fair position when it comes to ensuring self-reliance in manufacturing of warships also, petrol vessels also, submarines also, which are core to preserving the national security when it comes to especially the Indian Ocean region, wherein the China is increasing its foothold through the string of pearls theory. Then currently what is the scenario when it comes to the ship fleet that we have in India is there is dominance of old ships. Now when you have old ships, you will be using more fuel, okay, and the time that you will be taking, that would also be very large. Maybe the pollution from that old ship would be great. So in order to reduce the pollution, in order to reduce the carbon footprint also, and to reduce the logistic cost, we need to replenish the ships that we have in India. The reason being, almost 40% to 50% of the ships that we have in India, majority of them, their age is more than 15 years. So we need new ships now to strengthen the inland transportation as well as the cargo transportation. Then it would also have a multiplier effect. Now, if I start doing the shipbuilding within the domestic economy, what would happen? There would be increased demand for the marine grade steel, okay. Then the cargo transportation, the inland waterways would also improve, and that would reduce the dependence upon the roadways and the rail network also. So it would also lead to creation of jobs, and it would further give a boost to the other sectors, iron, steel, etc. And this would also help us to effectively realize the idea of blue economy. Blue economy basically talks about sustainable use of the oceans. And this would go a long way in reducing the logistic costs. We can reduce our dependence upon the roads, okay. We can reduce our dependence upon the rail network. And when you do the transportation through the ships, the cost is comparatively less. And this would also enable us, if we have like effective ships built within the country, then we can also make great strides when it comes to deep sea exploration of minerals and hydrocarbons, which would in turn help us to realize the idea of energy security in India. So these are some of the foremost reasons that why India wants to emerge as a global player by 2030 when it comes to the shipbuilding sector. Now, having understood the need, why do you think India is not able to make great advancement when it comes to the shipbuilding sector? Although we have put a target in front of ourselves that by 2030 we have to emerge as the top 10 global player when it comes to shipbuilding sector. Why, despite this particular target, even today India's contribution to the global shipping industry is less than 1%? First and the foremost reason being that we have outdated shipping yards. If you compare it with China, they are using advanced technology, okay? They are using cranes and all to do the shipbuilding, but we don't have that much of advanced technology. Then we have limited dry docks. So when it comes to India, whatever docks we have for the shipbuilding, the length is very less. You see, when it comes to Indian dry docks, they have a length of almost 310 meters. But you look at the shipbuilding docks used in China, it has a higher length, okay. So that is able, because of that, it is able to build large ships. Another problem is limited adoption of the technology. Then there are bureaucratic hurdles also. Because of this, it usually takes more than 3 years to build a large ship when it comes to India. Then another reason being the issues that we have with respect to the shipbuilding financial assistance policy. Now, under this particular policy, the government has created a corpus of around 4,000 crore rupees. And under this particular policy, the government is providing financial incentive of around 11 to 20% when it comes to the value of the ship that is being built in India. But the problem is, as highlighted by the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Transport, Tourism and Culture in 2024 report, that merely 6 to 7% of this entire corpus is utilized. Why is it so? Because one of the conditions which the government has imposed under this particular policy is you will be getting this much of financial incentive only and only when you build the ship within 3 years. But majority of the shipbuilding companies are not able to build a ship within 3 years because of the logistic challenges, because of the technology challenges, and because we have limited dry docks facility. We don't have dedicated berths for this thing, that okay, in this particular berth we will be only building the ships. That is also not there. Then another problem being that when it comes to shipbuilding, okay, you are providing the financial incentive, but you also need to look into this thing that majority of the material needs to be imported when it comes to India. So even if you talk about building a ship within India, we have to import marine grade steel, navigation system, propulsion equipment. So if you are importing, and on that the import duty would also be high, so that in turn increases the cost of production. Now this is going to disincentivize the companies when it comes to building the ship within India. So instead of building the ship within India, what they are going to do? They prefer to buy second-hand ships from China and Japan. That way it is less costly for them. But the government is not doing anything so that we can reduce this cost of production when it comes to the imported material. Then another problem is the poor ship repair ecosystem. Let's suppose even if we build the ship here, we have to be dependent upon the other countries when it comes to getting the ship repaired. If you go by the report of the Parliamentary Standing Committee, again on Transport, Tourism and Culture of 2024, it rightly points out that India's share in the global ship repair market is also less than 1%. Why? The same reason, we have limited dry docks. The length is very less as compared to the dry docks length that we have in case of China. So it is easier to repair large vessels also, but that is not possible given the short length when it comes to the dry docks in India. And that is the reason what happens, that Indian ship owners, they prefer to send their vessels to other countries like Singapore, China, UAE instead of getting it repaired within the country. So that is an additional cost. These are the various challenges that we are witnessing when it comes to the shipbuilding sector in India. Now let's explore that what all steps the government has taken in order to give a boost to the shipbuilding sector in India. First and foremost, the government have this understanding that this is a capital intensive sector. So that is the reason the government has taken various steps so that the companies can get the credit at a lower or at affordable interest rate. First and foremost, we have created India's first NBFC specifically for the maritime sector, that is Sagarmala Finance Corporation Limited, which has been created so that we can make credit available at an affordable rate for the shipbuilding sector. Okay, so shipbuilding industry has already been incorporated into the harmonized master list. But at what rate they will be provided with the credit, that depends upon that what is the quantity of ship, whether they are building small ships or large vessels. Based on that only the interest rate would be decided. Okay, but inclusion of shipbuilding sector in this harmonized master list simply means that now the shipbuilding sector would be able to avail credit at affordable interest rate. Then the shipbuilding financial assistance schemes that we discussed right now, under this the 11 to 20% of financial incentive is being provided if you are creating or building a ship within the Indian economy itself. And to make it more affordable to buy the new ships, the government is also providing the ship breaking credit note. Let's suppose there is a company A, it has an old ship and the value of that old ship is around 100 crore. Now, under the ship breaking credit note, what the government is saying, that if you provide this old ship for breaking to a ship breaking yard within the Indian economy, okay, then we would be providing you 40% of this 100 crore, which would be around 40 crore. So this 40 crore, which would be of the scrap value, this you can use to buy a new ship. Let's suppose the cost of new ship is around 200 crore. So now I have to make a cash payment of 160 crore and this 40 crore I can pay by using this ship breaking credit note. So that is how buying a new ship, the government is trying to make it affordable. Then we also have Maritime Development Fund. Again, a corpus of 25,000 crore has been created, wherein 49% of the money would be provided by the government and rest would be provided from the ports and the private sector for the development of the maritime sector. Then we are also creating plug and play infrastructure. So under the shipbuilding development scheme, the government has planned that we will be creating 8 mega shipbuilding clusters. Example, Durga Rajapatnam in Andhra Pradesh and Cherthala in Kerala. Then we have also provided the right of first refusal when it comes to the Indian ship companies. Let's suppose ONGC has to transport some material from Mumbai to Kolkata. Now, an Indian company says that I'll be able to do it in 1.5 crore. A foreign company says that I will be doing it in 1 crore. Now, the contract would not be given to this foreign fishing vessel until and unless the Indian company says that I cannot, do this transportation of cargo when it comes to 1 crore. But if the Indian company says that yes, I will be able to match this bid which has been placed by the foreign company, then the award would be given to the Indian company. But this right of first refusal means that if the Indian company says that no, it is out of my capacity to do this transportation, cargo transportation from Mumbai to Kolkata at this particular rate, that is 1 crore. And if it refuses to match the bid, only then the contract would be given to a foreign company. Okay, so these are the various schemes which the government is running to provide a boost to the shipbuilding sector in India. And recently we discussed that how India is collaborating with South Korea and MOUs have been signed in this respect. And 3 major players of South Korea, they have already announced their plan that they are going to make investment in India. This is going to give a further boost to shipbuilding sector in India. Now, having understood the challenges, the steps taken, the last thing that we need to have to make note of is what more needs to be done. So as we all know that under the India's Maritime Vision 2030, we have placed a target in front of us that by 2030, we have to emerge as top 10 shipbuilding nation, and by 2047, we need to be among the top 5. For realization of this particular vision, what needs to be done? We need to establish comprehensive industrial ecosystem for shipbuilding, basically plug and play infrastructure. A dedicated zone should be created. Dry berth, dedicated berths should be created wherein the shipbuilding activity needs to be done. And we need to try and reduce the import cost of, like, let's suppose as we discussed that we have to import marine grade steel, okay, navigation propulsion system. So the cost of importing these items should also be reduced, and the incentive, financial incentive, just like on the lines of production linked incentive scheme, needs to be provided so that all these things could be created within the Indian economy. Okay, so that would go a long way in reducing the cost of production. Then the policy support and the financial support that the government is providing, that needs to be sustained. Okay, there needs to be less fluctuation in that. Then we need to develop the capacity to absorb the technologies that we will be getting from South Korea. We need to put in place skilled workforce, because when it comes to India's workforce, merely 4% of them are formally skilled, as highlighted by the India Skill Report of 2024. So we need to put in place that the workforce is skilled. Then we need to create dedicated maritime institutions which would be doing the R&D. Okay. And this R&D would in turn help us in reducing the cost of production. How we can come up with effective technologies, how we can adopt different methods that would help us reduce the cost of production. And lastly, formulating a sectoral strategy with clearly defined goals and targets. Okay, instead of just this broad vision that, okay, we have to emerge as a top 10 shipbuilding nation by 2030, we need to put in place specific targets, that how much of the ships needs to be built in a particular year, what kind of support would be provided. That all needs to be clearly laid down. Just a broad vision would not work. A proper roadmap needs to be clearly chalked out by the government in this respect. And lastly, as the writer points out, that if South Korea can do this, if South Korea can emerge from a minor player way back in 1970s, and within 15 years, if it can emerge as a major player when it comes to shipbuilding industry, we can also do the same. So in this respect, we need to learn from South Korea. Its past experience, we need to learn from them. That's all that we need to know when it comes to this particular article. Based on the discussion that we have, I have framed a practice question for you people. So do practice this question, and with this, let's begin with the second topic. Now, the second topic is dealing with the rising road fatalities in India. And in this respect, the Supreme Court has given certain directives which majority of the states are not following. This particular topic you can relate with GS paper 2, infrastructure, and therein we have the roads topic. So as today's article rightly points out, that when it comes to India on an annual basis, we are witnessing 1.77 lakh road deaths. But despite this particular fact, majority of the Indian states have not put in place an effective trauma care architecture, which is very crucial to save the lives within the golden hour, that is within 1 hour of the road accident. Now let's try and understand the different facets related to road safety in India. First and foremost, you need to make note of certain data points which we can use to introduce a particular question related to road safety. So according to the Ministry of Road Transport and Highway, and along with NGO Safe Life Foundation, they have come up with a report which clearly points out that India ranks first in the world when it comes to road accident fatalities. And these road fatalities are costing around 3% of India's GDP on an annual basis. And if you look at the findings of India's status report on road safety 2024, road accidents are the 13th leading cause of death and 12th leading cause of health loss. Total crashes, if you note down, these many road accidents occur in India in 2023, and we have witnessed almost 4% increase as compared to the road accidents that we witnessed in 2022. And which is the state wherein majority of the road accidents and deaths are being witnessed? So that is UP. Majority of the road accident related deaths are reported in UP. And one of the most common victims of road accidents are basically the pedestrians, those who are using the cycles for transportation, and two-wheeler riders. And these are the 8 major states which account for almost 2/3 of the deaths in India alone. Now, let's try and understand that why we are not able to reduce the number of deaths related to road accidents. First and the foremost reason being that we are not guided by a safe system approach. Now, the government already know this particular fact that by 2047, the urban population is going to increase manifold. It would be accounting for almost 50% of the total population. But we are not planning our urban infrastructure in such a manner that we provide adequate footpaths, we create dedicated cycling tracks. These are missing when it comes to the urban infrastructure. Even the government have this particular idea that urban population is going to increase manifold by 2047, and this would also lead to a resultant increase in the vehicle ownership. Then also, we are not creating an inclusive urban infrastructure. So that is the first issue. And that is the reason we discussed right now who is the major one who is a victim when it comes to road accidents. These are the pedestrians, okay, or the person who are using cycle as a mode of transportation. Why it is so? Because of lack of wider footpaths and dedicated cycling tracks also. Then, what today's article points out that the states are adopting a lackadaisical approach. They are not effectively implementing the guidelines given by the Supreme Court in the recent 2026 judgment of the Supreme Court, that is re-follow the accident. So in this particular judgment, the Supreme Court pointed out that there are certain guidelines which the states need to follow. For example, all the emergency numbers needs to be integrated with the single number, that is 112, so that there is no confusion. Okay, I'll be dialing this 112 if I want to avail the services from police, fire department, medical, ambulance, highway, women, etc. So the states were supposed to integrate all the emergency services. I can avail through dialing this particular number, that is 112, but 7 out of the 8 states, they have not yet integrated all these emergency numbers with this 112. So that is one problem. Although when it comes to the Home Ministry in 2019, they have stated that okay, we have to integrate all the emergency numbers with the single number, that is 112, so that we avoid confusion. Because a person who is in this, who is in stress or who have been a victim of road accident, they are in so much of a panicking situation that they cannot recall that okay, what is a different number for police, what is a different number for availing the fire services, or what is a different number that I need to dial to get the ambulance services. So that is the reason, to avoid the confusion, all the emergency numbers needs to be integrated to the single number, but that has not been done by majority of the states. Then to ensure that a road accident victim is able to get due medical care within the golden hour, that is within the first hour of the accident, we need to protect the good Samaritans. Good Samaritans are the one who actually take a road accident victim to the hospital or to the healthcare facility. But normally, why the people are not very incentivized when it comes to providing help to that road accident victim? The reason being, they are fearful that later on they might be harassed by the police or by the medical facilities. So, to protect the Good Samaritans, the Good Samaritan rules in 2020 clearly states that anyone who helps an accident victim would be who receives medical attention within the golden hour would be eligible for a reward. But instead of giving this reward, what majority of the states still continue to follow? The Good Samaritans are forced to be harassed by the police and the hospitals. Majority of the questions are being asked to them. So that is the reason people are reluctant to give a helping hand to a road accident victim. As you can see that only 2 states, that is Maharashtra and Karnataka, have a grievance redressal system for Good Samaritans. Other states have not followed this particular guideline. Then another problem is lack of trauma response infrastructure, which is crucial to save a life of a road accident victim, especially during the golden hour. But as today's article clearly points out, that majority of the states have not taken due action when it comes to putting in place trauma response infrastructure. And why this trauma response infrastructure is important? If you go by Niti Aayog AIIMS Emergency and Injury Care Report of 2021, it clearly points out that at least 30% of all trauma-related deaths in the country are attributable to delays in emergency care. So if we could put in place effective trauma response infrastructure, we can reduce the number of deaths which are related to these road accidents. Another problem being that there is lack of trauma registry. Trauma registry is basically a database which would be tracking a patient's journey from the scene where the accident took place, which ambulance carried that particular person, where the treatment is being provided in which hospital center, and when he was discharged. But majority of the states are not maintaining these database, so it becomes difficult for the policy makers to figure out that where the problem actually lies. 5 out of the 8 states do not have a trauma registry. So that is another problem. Then another guideline which was given by the Supreme Court is that when it comes to the ambulance tracking dashboard, this needs to be made public, so that the road accident victim's family can verify whether the nearest ambulance service was actually dispatched on time or not. But since majority of the states are not coming up, or they are not maintaining this ambulance tracking dashboard, especially when it comes to the private ambulances, they are not linked to this particular dashboard. So it becomes difficult for the road accident victim's family to figure out that whether the nearest ambulance service was provided within time, that is within the golden hour, or not. Then another problem is when it comes to the people who are driving, there is distracted driving because of the increased mobile phone uses. You must have seen this when you are commuting on the roads. You must have seen people using the mobile phone. Okay, they are talking to someone, then they are texting while driving. So that diverts the attention and that adds to road fatality. Then there are faulty road designs also. There are a lot of black spots. Black spots are basically those areas where there is a sharp bend and you cannot see that which is the other vehicle which is coming. So because of this, these areas are more prone to road-related fatalities. And there are a lot of potholes also. And due to this, recently, as you can see in 2025 in Hyderabad, what happened? A gravel-laden lorry crashed into a bus, which led to death of around 19 people. Why that happened? Because the lorry driver was trying to avoid a pothole and then it crashed into a bus. So the black spots and potholes are one of the major reasons why we are witnessing these road fatality related cases in India. Then when it comes to the culture of road safety, that is very poor when it comes to India. When it comes to majority of the states, you will not see the culture which is there in Mizoram, where there is minimal honking, people drive in lanes. But when you try to commute in areas like Delhi or in any other city, you will see that people are in a rush. Even when the traffic signal shows that it is a red light, then also people would continue to honk. Okay, people don't use helmet. And when it comes to India, what is the mindset that we have is we wear helmet not because of our own safety. We wear helmet so that we are not, a fine could not be imposed by the traffic police. And that is the reason you see that the kind of helmets that are being used by the Rapido riders or the Uber riders, you will see they are very low quality. Okay, if some accident took place, okay, then those kind of helmets would not be able to provide the protection from head injury. So that is another problem. And the same is with respect to uses of seat belts when it comes to cars, and people don't adhere to the speed limits. That is another problem. Now, what all steps the government has taken to enhance road safety in India? First and foremost, the government is trying to address the infrastructural issues. For example, Ministry of Road, Transport and Highway, they have rectified around 5,000 black spots in India when it comes to the highways, and it has made it mandatory that on a regular basis the road safety audit needs to be done, so that we can proactively figure out that which area is a black spot, and accordingly the changes in the road design could be done. Potholes could be addressed, or it could be filled. Then we are making use of electronic enforcement mechanisms. So speed cameras are there. So if you breach the speed limit, then a fine challan would reach to your home. Okay, then automatic number plate recognition systems are being put in place. CCTV surveillance is there. So because of this increased surveillance only, you will see that majority of the auto rickshaw driver, they would be reluctant to break the traffic signals, because nowadays if you break the traffic signals, the challan would be reaching to your home because of this automatic number plate recognition system. Then the government is also putting in place the driving training centers, so that we can make sure that it should not be the case that a immature driver is driving on the road. Especially this joke is with respect to Papa ki Paris. Don't get offended, okay? Because I am also a female. My point is that it's not related to gender only. Anyone can be a poor driver. It's not the females only. But if you are driving on the road, first of all, you need to get adequate driving training in this respect. Only then you should get a driving license. Nowadays, when it comes to getting the driving license, the proper test is not conducted, unlike in foreign countries. Okay, a proper driving test is there, only then the driving license is issued to you. When it comes to India, yes, when it comes to issuing the commercial driving license, the government is very strict in that respect. Proper test is conducted, but when it comes to using the vehicle for personal use, effective driving test is not conducted before issuing the driving license. So government needs to look into that, and that needs to be rectified. So to provide training to these immature drivers, the government is setting up driving training centers, and to improve the fitness of the vehicles. If they crash with another vehicle, minimum fatality should be there. For that, we are also looking into the vehicle fitness also. So for that also, centers are being created to do the quality testing. Then we have put in place the National Road Safety Policy of 2010 based on the recommendation of S. Sundar Committee. And under this, road safety information database needs to be maintained, so that we can figure out where the pothole is, where there are black spots. And we need to review the road design standards, and vehicle safety standards needs to be reviewed on a regular basis. Then a council would also be created, National Road Safety Council, which would be advising the government and which would be supervising the matters related to road safety, and accordingly it would be advising the government in that respect. Then Motor Vehicles Amendment Act of 2019 tried to protect the good Samaritans, which are ensuring this fact that a road accident victim getting the medical care within the golden hour. So under this Motor Vehicle Amendment Act 2019, the government has clearly stated that whosoever is providing the help to a road accident victim would not be subjected to any criminal or civil liability in front of any court. Then under this particular act, we have also created National Road Safety Board, which would be advising the government related to traffic management. And Solatium Fund is also to be created, so that we can provide the necessary financial help to the victims of hit and run accidents. Going further, we have also put in place the data analytics. So to get real-time update related to the road infrastructure and the problems therein, we have this EDAR, that is Electronic Detail Accident Report, which is managed by the Ministry of Road, Transport and Highways, and the report is on an annual basis. It is published by the NCRB, National Crime Records Bureau. And by looking into this detailed report, the government is able to figure out that which area is more prone to accident, where we have faulty designs. Accordingly, it could be addressed. Then, to ensure and to uphold the road safety and the right to life, the Supreme Court has given a lot of judgment in this respect. First and foremost, the state of Tamil Nadu and K versus K. Balu and others 2016 judgment, Supreme Court has banned the sale of alcohols on the highway, because on the highway various instances were coming up wherein the instances were related to drink and driving, and that led to a lot of road fatalities and deaths. Then in 2016 judgment that we discussed right now, a lot of guidelines were given by the Supreme Court, and majority of the states, the 8 states wherein majority of the accidents are witnessed, they are not following those guidelines. And in this particular judgment, the Supreme Court clearly outlined that the safety of commuters is an integral part of right to life with dignity under Article 21. And the recent judgment that we discussed in the previous Analyst also, that is Maniar Ilyas at Sheikh Reyes versus P. Ayappan 2026 verdict of the Supreme Court. Supreme Court has clearly pointed out that you have the right to walk safely on the demarcated footpaths. It is your fundamental right. So with this particular judgment of 2026, wherein the Supreme Court has made walking on the footpath a fundamental right, the Supreme Court is trying to make a paradigm shift wherein the state used to treat road safety as a privilege or as a technical matter. Now they need to consider it as a human right related issue. Now, what more needs to be done so that we can enhance road safety in India? First and foremost, we need to be guided by safe system approach. We need to look into this particular fact that as the urban population is going to increase, the vehicle fleet is going to increase, and accordingly we need to make the necessary changes in the urban infrastructure. Wider footpaths should be there, dedicated cycling tracks should be put in place. And reduce limits, boards should be there wherever there is a populated area. Then, to realize all these things, we need money. As the World Bank in its 2020 report has pointed out that India would be needing approximately $109 billion over the next decade to reduce the road crash related incidents by 50%. So how are we going to address this financial constraint? So for this, we can use the CSR funds. So all the automobile manufacturing companies, we can make it mandatory for them for the next 20-25 years. They have to provide the CSR funds for meeting all these things, so that we can put in place wider footpaths, we can put in place dedicated cycling tracks, we can carry out public awareness campaigns that wearing helmet is for your own safety, don't do it just for mere compliance. And so that we can put in place effective emergency trauma care also. Then focus should be on 4 crucial E's of road safety. First is engineering, making better vehicles so that it can pass the anti-crash test. Then effective enforcement of whatever laws we have put in place, protecting the interest of good Samaritans, and effective enforcement of the Supreme Court order where it gave these 5 key directives to the states, that is a common emergency phone number, that is 112. GPS equipped ambulances should be there so that we can track their movement, that whether they reached on time or not. Good Samaritan law should be there so that we can, ensure that they are not subjected to any civil or criminal liability. A trauma registry should be there and a rescue protocol should be there, that how we are going to rescue a road accident victim. Then we need to focus upon education, that is public awareness, that why it is important to use the seat belts, why it is important to wear a helmet when you are commuting on the road. And we need to strengthen the emergency care, because that could go a long way in reducing the road accident related deaths. We will be able to provide due medical care facility within the golden hour. Then we need to strengthen the culture of road safety, like what we see in case of Mizoram, that needs to be replicated in other states also, wherein they are guided by minimal honking, they give the pedestrian that much of space that they can commute easily. Strict lane discipline is there. So this kind of culture needs to be replicated in other states, especially in the metropolitan cities. So in this respect, education, awareness needs to be spread. And for effective realization of Sustainable Development Goal 3.6, which talks about reducing the road fatalities related accidents by 50%. For that, we need to come up with a state-wise binding target framework in this respect. An annual performance review should be there, and based on the performance of a particular state only, the central government should be releasing the financial allocation when it comes to strengthening the highway infrastructure. That ways we can, use the competitive federalism aspect also, and this would also help us in improving the transparency when it comes to data availability. That's all that we need to know when it comes to this particular topic. I have framed a practice question for you people. So based on the discussion that we have, please try and attempt this particular question. With this, let's move on to the mains value addition part. Now, beginning with the mains value addition, the first article is dealing with the aspect of health. Now, the government has come up with a unique QR code when it comes to dealing with counterfeit drug issue. So now the government has given this particular directive that all the Schedule H2 drugs under this drugs rule of 1945, that the manufacturer of vaccines, antimicrobials, addictive medicines and cancer drugs, they need to fix a QR code on the package, and this QR code would enable the government to do end-to-end tracking from the date it was manufactured from the factory and on what date it reached to the patient. Because what was happening in the meantime is, why the government has come up with this particular move is, some of the players, what they were doing, they were refilling the empty bottles, okay, of drug cancers related medicines with other products like antifungal medicines and selling it to unsuspecting cancer patients. So all this is leading to antimicrobial resistance when it comes to India. Okay, so to deal with this counterfeit drugs in India and to address the antimicrobial resistance, the government has taken this good initiative that is coming up with the QR code, which would enable the government to do end-to-end tracking. And when it comes to this QR code, is it for the first time that we are doing this? The answer is no. It is already applicable to top 300 brands of medicine at the present time. And what all information we can get to know by scanning that QR code? So you can get the name and the address of the drug manufacturer, the company, the manufacturing and the expiry dates and the batch number as well. Okay, so when all these information would be there, these players would not be able to do the refilling of empty bottles. Now, this is something that you can quote when you are writing an answer on antimicrobial drug resistance. Okay, or you can use this particular thing when it comes to use of technology in health. Okay, so in both the topics, you can use this current example that how the government has come up with the QR code to do end-to-end tracing from factories to patients. Moving on to the next topic of mains value addition. Again, this is also related to health. This example again you can quote when you're talking about role of technology in the domain of health. Now, what the Ministry of Civil Aviation and the Delhi International Airport Limited has done, we have come up with the Air Suvidha 2.0. Now, this is important for your mains also, and a prelims question also could be asked. Now, why we have come up with this Air Suvidha 2.0? Because recently WHO has declared Ebola virus disease outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo and Uganda as a public health emergency of international concern in the last month itself. Now, to make sure that the Ebola disease is not reaching to Indian borders, we have come up with this Air Suvidha 2.0. Now, what it is all about? So, before a passenger, international passenger is boarding the flight, before that they have to fill the form. And in this form, they have to tell the 21-day travel history, their exposure history and related symptoms before their immigration clearance. So this would be a self-declaration form wherein the passenger itself would be telling that, okay, where all I visited. We are making them to fill this form to make sure that they have, in this last 21 days, have they visited the Democratic Republic of Congo or Uganda or the bordering nations, okay? So that we can make sure that Ebola disease does not reach the Indian frontiers. Okay, so this would enable swift identification, and if any passenger is at a risk of getting contaminated with this particular disease, so accordingly the referrals would be made to the health authorities. state surveillance officers, Bureau of Immigration, etc., and airport health officers. This information would be shared with, so that if any passenger is at risk when it comes to getting affected by this Ebola virus, the adequate medical care could be provided. Now, as I told you, this particular example, Air Suvidha 2.0, you can use if you are talking about the role of technology when it comes to the health domain, okay? Because it is a kind of portal that we have created, and this is enabling us to do effective contact tracing when it comes to Ebola virus. Now, that's all that we need to know with respect to this particular topic. Let's move on to the prelim pointer segment. Now, what has happened is NCERT has introduced the emergency that was proclaimed in 1975 from class 9th onwards. Earlier, the reference of this national emergency that was proclaimed in 1975, it was made for the first time in class 12th textbook. But now this reference would be there from class 9th onwards. And why the NCERT has done this? Because last year, India recently observed 50 years since the declaration of national emergency, which was done in 1975. Now, this particular topic you can relate with the polity section of your prelim syllabus. Now, let's try and understand that what is this national emergency all about. So, when it comes to emergency, it is mentioned in the part 18th of the Indian Constitution, and emergency is dealt with article 352 to 360, wherein we have the national emergency, wherein we have financial emergency, wherein we have the precedent rule also. But since this article is dealing with national emergency, we will be looking into the important prelim pointers related to national emergency only. Now, when it comes to the national emergency, since independence, we have proclaimed it thrice. When we were in war with China, so during the Indo-China War in 1962, the national emergency was proclaimed on the grounds of war or external aggression. Then in 1971, we were in war with Pakistan, and that led to liberation of Bangladesh. Again, it is a kind of external emergency because it was done on the ground of war or external aggression. The most controversial emergency that we have since independence is 1975, wherein the ground was internal disturbance. Now, before the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act, there were 3 grounds that was mentioned under Article 352, based on which the President can proclaim the national emergency. That was war, external aggression, and internal disturbance. Then, when it comes to the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act of 1978, we changed this word internal disturbance with armed rebellion. Why? Because this internal disturbance, this word has vague and a very wider connotation. That is the reason when it comes to internal emergency now, the word would be armed rebellion and not internal disturbance. Now, what is the process of approval and the duration till which it can be enforced? So earlier, what used to happen before the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act of 1978, the Prime Minister was supposed to just make an oral recommendation to the President and the emergency would be proclaimed. But 44th Constitutional Amendment Act inserted certain procedural safeguard in this respect. Firstly, it stated that it is not possible for the Prime Minister that it can just give an oral recommendation to the President in this respect. It needs to have a word with the Cabinet, and based on the written recommendation given by the Cabinet in this respect, only then the President can proclaim a national emergency. Okay, not merely on the oral advice given by the Prime Minister. Then, earlier when it comes to the proclamation of national emergency, once it has been proclaimed by the President, we had the timeline of 2 months. So within 2 months, both houses of the Parliament has to approve this. 44th Constitutional Amendment Act reduced it to 1 month time period. Then, earlier when it comes to approving this proclamation of national emergency by the 2 houses of the Parliament, that has to be done by a simple majority. But when it comes to 44th Constitutional Amendment Act, it incorporated additional procedural safeguard. Now, we need special majority when it comes to both the houses. And earlier, what was the scenario? Before this 44th Constitutional Amendment Act, once the emergency is proclaimed, it would continue till the time the Prime Minister would not be advising the President that you do away or you discontinue with the national emergency. So everything was dependent upon the discretion of the Council of Ministers or the Prime Minister. But now, after the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act, what we have stated that at the interval of 6 months, you need to get the parliamentary approval. And every time you're getting this parliamentary approval, what would be the majority? Majority would be special majority and not a simple majority. Now, when you talk about the process of revocation of national emergency, before the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act, the Parliament has no role in this respect. The President, through a subsequent proclamation, could do away with the national emergency. But the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act inserted a procedural safeguard in this respect also. It stated that if a written notice is signed by 1/10 of the total members of the Lok Sabha, and this notice is given to the Speaker if the House is in session, and it needs to be given to the President if the House is not in session, then a special sitting needs to be organized wherein the Lok Sabha would be looking into this particular question, that whether the national emergency should continue or it needs to be discontinued. Now, if in the special sitting, Lok Sabha passes a resolution by a simple majority, then the President has to revoke the national emergency. Now, you must be noticing this particular fact that when it comes to the approval of national emergency, it needs to be approved by both the houses of the Parliament. So, the Rajya Sabha also have a role to play when it comes to approval of national emergency. But when it comes to revocating it, herein only the Lok Sabha has a major role. Okay, Rajya Sabha has no role to play in this respect. Secondly, for approval, we need special majority, and for revocation, we need just a simple majority. Now, let's try and understand that how the national emergency has impact on the center-state relationship. Now, during the normal times, the central government can give executive directives to the states on certain matters like the maintenance of railways, like matters related to tribal interest. But during the national emergency, the central government becomes all the more powerful, and it can give executive directions on any matter to the state, any matter which is mentioned in the state list. Then when you talk about the legislative relations, during this time, the Parliament has the power to make laws on any subject which is there in the state list. Now, this does not mean that the state legislatures are suspended or the state legislature lose their power to enact any law. But whatever law they are creating when it comes to the state legislature, that would be subjected to the overriding powers of the Parliament. So that means if the law made by the state legislature during the national emergency is in conflict with the law made by the Parliament, then the parliamentary law would prevail. And whatever law the Parliament is making on any matter which is there in the state list during the national emergency, such a law would become inoperative 6 months after the national emergency ceased to operate. Now, it also have an impact on the financial relations. So, during the national emergency, the President have all the right to modify the constitutional distribution of revenue between the center and the state. So, he can reduce or altogether he can cancel the distribution of revenue from center to state. But all such presidential order needs to be led before both the houses of the Parliament. And such a modification is going to continue till the end of the financial year in which the emergency ceases to operate. Now, what is the impact on the life of Lok Sabha and the State Legislative Assembly? So, they can be extended beyond their normal term of 5 years by a parliamentary law. So, a parliamentary law only can extend the term of State Legislative Assembly also, but this extension could be done 1 year at a time. And any number of time they can do that, but at one instance, they can increase the tenure by 1 year only. Okay, as was done in case of 5th Lok Sabha. So, its tenure was extended till 1977, which started from 1971. Similar is for the State Assembly, and it needs to be done by the parliamentary law. And extension cannot continue beyond a period of 6 months after the emergency ceases to operate. Now, the last thing that we need to look into is what is the impact of national emergency when it comes to the fundamental rights. Now, the 6 fundamental rights that you enjoy under Article 19, that is freedom of speech and expression, freedom to move freely and all that, they become automatically suspended when the national emergency is proclaimed on the grounds of war or external aggression. Now, this procedural safeguard was incorporated again by 44th Constitutional Amendment Act. Earlier, all the fundamental rights that you have under Article 16, they were automatically suspended as and when the national emergency come into picture. Does not matter whether it was on the grounds of war, external aggression or internal disturbance. But the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act clearly stated that the fundamental rights that we enjoy under Article 19, if the national emergency has been proclaimed on the grounds of only war or external aggression, then only the fundamental rights under Article 19 would be automatically suspended. But if the national emergency is proclaimed on the grounds of armed rebellion, then the rights that we enjoy under Article 19 would not be suspended. Okay, so please make note of this particular fact. When it comes to Article 359, herein what happens is the president would be coming up with the order, and therein he would be mentioning that, okay, when it comes to your right to go to the court for the enforcement of a particular fundamental right, that rights get suspended. So the right to constitutional remedies related to specific FR, which the president would be mentioning in its order, that gets suspended. So fundamental rights are there, but you cannot go to the court for its enforcement. That is the thing when it comes to Article 359. Now, when it comes to the suspension of FR, which is done under Article 359, it operates in both the cases, whether the ground is war, external aggression, or the armed rebellion. Then, when it comes to Article 358, suspension would be there for the entire duration of national emergency, because we studied that automatically it gets suspended. But when it comes to Article 359, whatever FR, their enforcement is going to get suspended, that period could be specified by the president. It could be for the entire duration till the time the national emergency is in force, or a specified period that is to be specified by the presidential in its presidential order. Then, when it comes to Article 358, the suspension of FR under Article 19 would be extended to the entire country. But under Article 359, when it comes to suspension of your right to constitutional remedy related to certain FR, it could be extended to the entire country or to a part of India. And when it comes to Article 358, as we discussed that the rights that you enjoy under Article 19, they automatically get suspended, but here that needs to be done with the help of a presidential order. Now, another procedural safeguard which was incorporated by the 44th Constitutional Amendment Act with respect to Article 359 is that the president cannot end the enforcement of the FR that we enjoy under Article 20 and under Article 21. Okay, so these two FR, their enforcement cannot be suspended. That's all that we need to know when it comes to this particular topic. Let's move on to the next topic. Sadly, Venezuela has been struck by two earthquakes, one of magnitude 7.2, another of magnitude 7.5, according to US Geological Survey. And the two earthquakes were separated by less than a minute. They impacted the capital city of Venezuela, that is Caracas. And when it comes to Venezuela, already the country is witnessing economic turmoil, and this double earthquake is going to add to the further worries. Now, this particular topic you can relate with the prelim section of your syllabus, that is places in news. Now, let's understand the news further. Why Venezuela is prone to these earthquakes? The reason being, it sits along the boundary between two tectonic plates, that is Caribbean plate and the South American plate. As you can see here you have Venezuela, here you have Caribbean plate, and this is South American plate. Now, since it lies at the boundary between the two tectonic plates, that is why it is more prone to such earthquakes. Now, the present double earthquake that we have witnessed, it was because of the strike-slip fault. Here you have two blocks, one is moving in this direction, another one is moving in opposite direction. So when the two blocks slide past one another, that is what is referred to be as strike-slip fault. And that, according to the experts, was the reason why we witnessed the double earthquake when it comes to Venezuela currently. There are other kind of faults also. One is the normal fault. By the way, what is fault? Fault is a fracture zone where two blocks of rock, and when these blocks move rapidly, they cause earthquake. Now, what is a normal fault? Wherein the block above the fault moves downward relative to the block below. Whereas when it comes to the reverse fault, what is happening? The upper block above the fault plane moves upward, and the lower one would be further moving downwards. Now, when it comes to this earthquake, why it was so destructive? The reason being, the tremors emerged from a very shallow depth of just 10 km. And that is the reason the shock waves were able to reach to the surface with a very high intensity. When it comes to doublet, are they similar to aftershock? The answer is no. Aftershock is usually of a lower magnitude as compared to the main earthquake, whereas doublets are two independent events and they might be roughly of the same magnitude. Like when it comes to Venezuela, we studied right now, first one was of 7.2 and the other one recorded a magnitude of 7.5. So they can be roughly of same magnitude. And it is for the first time that we are witnessing doublet. The answer is no. In 2023, we witnessed the doublet when it comes to Turkey and Syria. 2021, we witnessed near Malaysia, and we also witnessed triplets in 1988 near Australia. Now let's note down certain prelim pointers related to the Venezuela. Now as you can see here also, Venezuela is situated here. One tectonic plate is Caribbean Sea, another tectonic plate is the South American plate. And that is the reason it is more and more vulnerable to seismic activity. Now as you can see, it is situated on the northern coast of South America. The boundary countries are Guyana, Brazil and Colombia. And it shares the maritime borders with the Caribbean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean here. Here you have the Atlantic Ocean, here you have the Caribbean Sea. Capital is Caracas, and when it comes to the Venezuela, it has the world's largest oil reserves and a large amount of gas reserves, as well as huge quantities of coal, iron ore, bauxite, as well as gold. Now when it comes to Venezuela, what are the major rivers? So you have Orinoco River, which empties in the Atlantic Ocean, Rio Negro, which drains into Amazon River, and Lake Maracaibo, which is the largest lake in South America. And it also have the world's highest waterfall, that is the Angel Fall, which is located in Guyana Highland. That's all that we need to know with respect to this particular topic. Let's move on to the next one. Now, after UAE, now Iraq has also threatened OPEC that we will be leaving this particular organization if our oil quota is not raised. This particular topic you can associate with the prelims, that is events of international importance. Now, when it comes to Iraq, why it is important to OPEC? The reason being, as you can see here, it is the second largest producer after Saudi Arabia. And why the Iraq is threatening OPEC that we would be leaving this particular organization? The reason being, its economy is under strain because of the blockade that we are witnessing near the Strait of Hormuz. Because Iran is not ready to ease the blockade when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz. And in today's newspaper, it has been pointed out that Iran has clearly stated that we will be imposing maritime service fee. And if this comes into force, what would happen? The cost of exporting crude oil would increase further, and this would be negatively impacting the Iraq's economy. Now, when it comes to Iraq, if it exits this particular OPEC organization, what would happen? This is going to give a severe blow to this particular grouping when it comes to deciding the oil prices across the globe. And recently itself, UAE has also walked out, and as you can see from this particular picture that UAE, which was the fourth largest producer when it comes to the OPEC organization, it has already left this OPEC entity just 2 months before. And before UAE, there were other OPEC countries also which have left this particular organization. So Qatar left it in 2019 and Angola left it in 2024. Now, this is going to create long-term uncertainty because the exit of Iraq, if it happens, this is going to mark the beginning of the gradual decline of this particular entity ability to control the crude oil prices across the globe. And one more fact that you need to make note of is when it comes to OPEC, it was founded in the Iraqi capital of Baghdad in 1960. Now, let's make note of certain prelim facts related to OPEC. So, Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, it is a permanent intergovernmental organization which was established at the Iraqi capital of Baghdad. So, it was established through the Baghdad Conference in 1960. And prior to OPEC formulation, there was Western multinational oil companies which were referred to as the Seven Sisters, which used to dictate the crude oil prices. That is the reason the OPEC was formed by the crude oil producing nations so that they could work as a cartel and they could determine the crude oil prices. So the aim was to counter this dominance of the Western multinational companies and coordinate the petroleum policies by regulating the output of crude oil. That way, if they decide that we want to get more price for the crude oil, what they'll do, they'll decide to reduce the output. And that is what was the reason the UAE exited. UAE was of the view that if you are going to restrict the output that I can produce, this is going to negatively impact my economy. Let's take the advantage of the situation, because currently all the major nations are focusing towards renewable energy. And if we don't increase the production capacity currently, then in the later date, we will not be able to make more money by just exporting crude oil. And that is the similar argument the Iraq is also giving. So when it comes to Iraq, if it exited this particular organization, this is going to give a severe blow to this particular organization. Why? Because as you can see, Iraq was one of the founding members. Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia and Venezuela, these were the founding members when it comes to OPEC. And who are the other member countries? You can just go through this particular information that I've given here. And when it comes to UAE, it has formally joined the alliance in 1967. Its secretariat is situated in Vienna, Austria, and one of its report which the OPEC comes up with is the World Oil Outlook. Now, there's another organization that is OPEC Plus. What is this OPEC Plus? So it is also known as Vienna Group, and it was created in 2016, basically to counter the US booming shale oil production. So when it comes to OPEC Plus, so here you will be having the OPEC members, plus you also have 10 non-OPEC countries, and the leader here is Russia and not Saudi Arabia. And these are the 10 non-OPEC countries. You can just go through this particular slide. Now, these countries signed a declaration of cooperation undertaking a production adjustment so that they could decide the price of the crude oil, and they should be the one who would be working as a cartel, and they would be the one who would be deciding that what is the price that they should be getting when it comes to the crude oil that they are producing by limiting the production. That's all that we need to know when it comes to this particular topic. Let's move on to the next one. Now, the last topic of today's analyst is related to Netra, which is India's airborne surveillance platform. It has got the final operational nod from DRDO. Now, when it comes to this Netra, it was crucial when it comes to carrying out the Balakot strike in 2019, and it was also crucial when we carried out Operation Sindoor. This particular topic you can relate with the defense section of your prelim syllabus. Now, when it comes to this Netra, DRDO has granted the final operation clearance to indigenously build Netra airborne early warning control system. Now, when it comes to this Netra, it has been built through a collaboration between the Indian Air Force, DRDO and Bangalore-based startup, that is Center for Airborne Systems. Now, when it comes to this Netra, it is commonly known as the Indian Air Force Eye in the Sky. Why? Because it is a high mobile flying radar station that can scan a vast area beyond the limits of conventional ground-based radar systems. And that way, it can give a real-time information to the Indian Air Force. And by using that information, they can determine that, okay, this helicopter is related to our friend country or it is a enemy country related flight jet. Now, when it comes to India, globally, we have become the 5th country to develop such a capability. It's not like when it comes to this Netra, it was not getting any operational clearances. First clearances it got in 2015, and that is why in 2017 it got inducted, and that is why we were able to use this when it comes to Balakot strike of 2019, and it was also crucial as we studied when it comes to Operation Sindoor also. But this is the final operational clearance that it has got from the DRDO. Now, the benefit would be that the Indian Air Force would be getting a flexible, highly efficient tactical force multiplier to monitor sensitive border areas, track hostile intrusions when it comes to Indian airspace, coordinate complex network-centering air combat missions. Now, what are the crucial features or key features of this Netra? It has an airframe base, so it has a twin-engine Mbare EBM 145 regional jet airframe, which is imported from Brazil. And this platform features customized in-flight refueling probes, enhanced electrical generators, and high-capacity climate cooling system to power the radar electronics. Then it also have active electronically scanned array radars. It can scan an area up till a range of 250 kilometers and simultaneously track more than 200 distinct aerial objects. And by scanning these aerial objects, we can very well figure it out that this aerial object belongs to a friend country or an enemy country. And accordingly, the action could be taken, counter action could be taken. Comprehensive sensor fusion. Beyond standard tracking, the platform integrates electronic support measures and communication support measures to intercept, map, and pinpoint enemy radar positions and radio networks. And in case it feels any threat, it has a robust self-protection electronic warfare suite also to protect itself from the incoming hostile missiles. And it can form a multi-layered air defense monitoring umbrella as well. That's all that we need to know in today's Analyst. Quiz would be coming right up next, so don't forget to practice the quiz and please check your knowledge. Till then, keep smiling, keep learning. Have a great day, all of you.